Andy, you are currently writing for Forbes.
Yep.
But you've written for Rolling Stone magazine. You've written for ESPN. You've written for the Chicago Tribune. Maybe a moment of silence for the Chicago Tribune after today. So where'd you get your journalism degree?
Well, it's funny you ask. I did not go to journalism school.
I knew the answer to that, but yeah. So you've got a great, and the reason I reached out, I remember you posted something on Twitter actually about, taking kind of a leap almost, because you were thrown out on the street. What did you say? Eddie Murphy style in Beverly Hills Cop or something?
Yeah, I think, so I think the thing you're talking about is it's just like my one post I've ever done on LinkedIn.
That's right.
I think LinkedIn is an underused tool, and especially for like podcasters and writers, because it's like there's people like you and me, but they're doing work they don't want to do, and they get caught up in like reading about sports or whatever. And anyway, I wrote basically like I think it was pretty much how like I got tossed out of basically I'm a corporate reject, and how that sort of kicked me in the butt. And literally I got my last corporate job was ended Halloween 2013, and it was at the very end of my best sales month ever at this currency firm I was working at. So it was kind of surprising. I got like the biggest trades I've ever done, had a great month. Like the summer was rocky, but that summer was rocky for everybody in the business. So I think it was one of those political things that happens with small companies where the head of sales, if he doesn't like your manager, he gets rid of your manager, and then everybody the manager has hired, whether they're good or not. And, there's also kind of a piece where if you clear your P&L up a little bit, you might get a bigger bonus because you're spending less money. It was one of those things. Yeah. So I always kind of thought like they could have at least like thrown me out the window, or
right.
Sitting there with sitting there talking with somebody, and you're fired. And I light up a cigarette and blow smoke in his face and say, "You can't fire me. I quit, but I don't smoke, and we can't smoke in the building." It's not like it was circa Beverly Hills Cop came out like 83. So I'm sure that downtown high-rise lobby security has improved since then, but it got the wheels turning and thinking like, I'm no expert. I don't have a following necessarily on my writing, but I have some, tips for anybody else who's feeling like, God, I hate my job, or I dislike my job, but I really want to do this other thing. And it's, whether it's knitting or, competing in Taekwondo, or you want to write a book, maybe you can't quit your day job doing it right away, but there's no excuse that you shouldn't, if you want to be a sports writer, start blogging about sports or so on. So, I didn't go to journalism school. I kind of went to college and intended to major in it, and then switched colleges. And it just kind of, I was a freshman DJ. I was the only freshman at the University of Mississippi who got to work at the commercial radio station there, transferred to Miami of Ohio. And then it was like from me having my own show during SEC football games to maybe when you're a senior, we might let you turn on the record player for big band Bob playing the hits from the 40s all day, so, and at least in the late 80s, early 90s, I mean, there was no social media, there was no blogging. You thought like, I don't know if I could, I can't really become a sportscaster or a writer, and I should find a real day job, and I got to major in something that matters. So kind of in a roundabout way, that piece that you were talking about was about, I think maybe I was destined to write about sports or to rant about sports, and I just kind of came about it the long way. But the passion for it always itched in the back of my head. So eventually I finally listened, and, getting tossed out of the cubicle sort of maybe step it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's actually, I know it's like something that you just sort of wrote, on LinkedIn, but I personally found it pretty inspiring, because I think there's a lot of us that sort of dabble. Like I play in this little space, right? And I'm sure you were dabbling in the sports writers world before you kind of had a moment to think about and say, I want to actually pursue that. But you talked about a couple of things. One of them was don't give up on your passion, even if at the time it seems like it's just something to do. Like if it's just like a time killer, a hobby or whatever, but it's a passion for a reason, and you should embrace it and kind of chase it a little bit almost.
Yeah. I think, it doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, if you if I told you, if I went to, hired a career counselor when I started blogging at age about 38 or 39 and said,
Yeah.
I really want to see if I can interview Deion Sanders someday. And I don't have any contacts in media, but, maybe I'd like to see if I could write for ESPN. They probably would have said, stick to sales, don't quit your day job.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might get the person said, yeah, go for it. Really great. And, pay my invoice after we're done here. But I think you got to believe in yourself. And like you probably, I have, you're wearing all your Pearl Jam gear. Obviously you have to have a healthy sense of cynicism about the world. Otherwise you'd be wearing a Celine Dion t-shirt instead of Pearl Jam, believing in, the perfect love story.
Right.
I think it's just, you need to kind of be realistic. And, I'm not going to talk too long here. I can give you examples, but one thing I found is, if you're open to everything and you say yes to things, a lot of cool things happen. And I can elaborate on that if you wish, but you can't just say, I only want to interview, NFL superstars. I don't want to write about high school football because you might miss a chance to get to your end game.
You talked about that, but talk about just saying yes to anything, right? And how that sort of connects you. Part of it is work, right? You're doing it. Part of it is building relationships too, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back in the summer 2011, I wrote one piece for ESPN on a sport called Fistball, which is kind of like volleyball. It's like a variant sort of. And it was at the time that Page 2 was doing all kinds of weird stuff. It was like a pop culture news subsection of ESPN.com. And, you probably remember, Bill Simmons was on it, and they had rock stars and actors, like talking about sports or writing the one-off blog. And so the other thing they were doing is like weird sports that are actually real. So I have a friend who covered, someone who covered the Matt Lindner. I'm not sure if you know him. He's written for the Tribune and he used to write for MLB. He covered, I want to say for a long time, the competitive eating, basically, like the hot dog championships that they do on the 4th of July every year.
Yeah.
I think on Coney Island or whatever. It's been on ESPN or the major channels ever since maybe like 20 some odd years ago. So I think he put on his embedded reporter helmet and hung out with Joey Chestnut and maybe Kobayashi to like watch them eat 35 hot dogs, like as a Thursday night practice or something. And if they do like 2 a days eating hot dogs and tacos to stomach, but he was doing that. And I'm thinking, well, so I pitched a couple of things and got shot down. And anyway, long story short is I got this sport called Fistball that nobody heard of, but there's a U.S. team and they're playing in the World Cup that was in Austria that summer in 2011. I thought, this is great. I'll probably never have a chance to write for ESPN again. And when I uncovered the opportunity to write about local high school football for ESPN, back when they had a prep blog, ESPN Chicago doesn't have that anymore that I know of. But anyway, long story short, it was like I knew somebody was running a blog. It was prep football, and I just kind of emailed them and said, hey, I know you're doing this. If you want someone else to write about high school football, I'd love to do it. I didn't really care how much the pay was or if I got paid. I just said, I'll do it. I've written one piece for ESPN. And I think that one piece, and maybe if he looked at my byline even for 20 seconds, he said, okay, this guy's done it before. Yeah. And he said, I'll get you a game next week. And the next week I'm on the South Side covering Catholic League football.
Yeah.
With Marist. I think it was Marist versus, my first game was Brother Rice and Mount Carmel and Brother Rice. They're like bitter rivals. Big
time. So, for those that don't know, big time local football, high school football.
That's like, the high school football equivalent of the Yankees, Red Sox when they're both good.
Yeah.
So just, and every week I had a game and I got paid $50 for game recap. And then when the playoffs came, I started doing like Friday night and Saturday, and that wrapped up and I kept looking for opportunities. So, I didn't say to myself, I only want to cover pro sports. I don't want to cover high school football. That's stupid. Like if you take that attitude, you're going to miss opportunities. And I think you just need to be more open, even if you're an established writer. Who knows what happens when you say yes or kind of just choose to be receptive.
I was going to ask, do you still have that mentality? Like, I know you're a big time Forbes writer guy now. No, do you still, you still say, okay, I'll write about that. I'll write about that, or I'll write about that, whatever totally. It may be.
Yeah. So, I got to interview Mike Trout, I guess about 3 weeks ago. And, like you Google Mike Trout and there's a million articles about him. I didn't really get a lot of reads on that. And I know that that's the main reason why. And I didn't have anything major to reveal about him. But I've interviewed a couple of, I've written about racing a bit, mostly NASCAR, but I've interviewed a couple of women who are in different areas of race car driving. So I interviewed Samantha Tan, like my very last story of December, I think. It was at the end of last year, maybe in the first story of this year. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I don't know, not a lot of people know about her. But, that was actually my most read article on Forbes since I've been doing it for the 3 years. And then about a month later, when somebody emailed me about Lindsay Brewer, who races in the TC America series here. Yeah. And their races are like every couple of weeks. It's not like NASCAR where it's every Sunday, but, she's really engaging. I mean, I think the feature photo I put in the article didn't hurt. I mean, she's blonde and looks like a movie star.
Right.
But, she talked a lot about like being underestimated because of that. Like that
Sure.
People see her and think, oh, she must be one of the I don't know, one of the concierge girls, or maybe she'll, hand me some free swag. And then they find out that she's a driver.
Yeah.
And that she's not just there to, be a cheerleader. And she said, it's cool when you get to kind of surprise people and show them what's up. So those were two articles that, I didn't know anything about the athlete, the sports person when it was presented to me. And, I wouldn't have said, well, I only write about, people I've heard. I've only wrote, because, you miss a chance to connect and get other opportunities that way. So, and then I can talk about how that's happened in golf too, because it's been more profound in golf. But
yeah. Go ahead. Go for it.
Well, so the first golfer I interviewed for about 10 minutes was Brooks Koepka about 3 years ago.
Wait, how does that, like, when you say that for about 10 minutes, is it you just crossed paths and you grabbed him, or was this something that was set up and said, you've got 10 minutes, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I have some existing relationships with publicists, and this firm had sent me some athletes before. I've interviewed them and done some pretty cool pieces. And I think they just had this promotion thing. So literally what it was is I think it was between it might have been a little bit, it was after the Masters, and I think before, or I might have it backwards, but it was in the spring of 2018. And so Brooks Koepka was on there on an off week, and Michelob Ultra was sponsoring this thing where basically if he could hit it onto this barge in the middle of New York Harbor, like everybody in New York gets a free beer next Tuesday or something. So it was kind of kitschy and like writing for a business magazine. You can mention the off the field, off the course stuff that they do, but you can't be too salesy. So it was kind of like, here's one of the things that he's doing that's kind of interesting. And so he talked about that, but I asked some questions that you would probably want to ask a golfer too, like, what about your mentality and your stroke, and how do you make sure you're doing? If you've got the things in your game that are perfected, how do you make sure you keep doing them every week and not get in your head? And he's kind of the strong and silent type, I think, like the captain of the football team sort of person that you and I went to high school with, and super excitable, but, pretty straightforward. And I asked him about who influenced him to play golf. And of course he said Tiger. Everybody of that generation, I think, says Tiger. And, from there, just got some other opportunities to talk to other top golfers, and, got to some pretty big opportunities by the end of that year and, going forward. So,
yeah, you've, so it was Brooks. And then, Jason Day, I think you've interviewed.
Day and Finau were about the same time. And they were both talking up the US Open, which I think, it must've been the US Open, because it was like midsummer when I was talking to those guys. And then I kind of forgot about it for a while. And then I got, an email from another person, I think at the same firm that sent me Brooks, and was like, do you want to meet Greg Norman at some point? And, it just kind of worked out with vacations and what I was doing, that there's 3 journalists that got a chance to actually meet him in person. And that was pretty cool. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what was the Greg Norman thing kind of, cause I know he's quite the businessman. Was that kind of part of the conversation around what he's doing there?
Yeah. Okay. So whenever the publicists, contact you and they have an athlete for a limited amount of time, they're not like, unless you're talking to somebody who's like first week on the job, they know that you have to strike a balance as a writer between, what good content and also what they're trying to accomplish in terms of maybe publicity. So at the time, I think the lead in was actually just that he didn't even have a new project, but it was about his golf course design, which he's been doing since, I didn't even know at the time, he'd been doing it since the late 80s. So I was interested in that because I wanted to know how much he knew about landscape and, what was he just the guy who gets airlifted in to say, put a green here,
puts his name on it or whatever.
Or does he? And I found that actually he knows the terrain. I mean, understands ecosystems and also the sort of, if you do it the wrong way, you don't care about the community that you're putting a golf course in, that you can really piss off the locals and the neighbors.
Yeah.
It can't just be about the rich guys who throw money into the project or, the future club members. You've actually got to, be mindful of what you're doing. So, so we talked about that. And I think as I've said a couple times before, I think Greg Norman, you can just tell that he probably enjoys business and being a business tycoon, owning his own firm as much or more than being a world famous legendary golfer. Like, I think he really loves the business end of it. And I think before that, I only knew about the apparel. Like, you walk through Macy's, you see Nautica, you see Brooks Brothers, you see, not Brooks Brothers, but you see like brands like that. And then there's a Greg Norman section where there's a cool hat or two. And what it used to be was kind of stuff that like my dad would wear, but it's evolved to be pretty trendy. And, it's upper middle echelon clothing and it's quality, but it's sporty too. And it's not sporty in kind of a patronizing, archetypical golf way. So, we talked about those different lines of business, and I just got to ask him, like, so tell me about your worst days on the golf course and who you hated to play against and who'd you like to play with or against. And he having been in sales, I know to ask either a loaded or an open-ended question, and then you shut up and then you hear what they say, and usually they'll take liberties to tell you what they want to tell you, and cool stories come out. So that's how it works.
So did you play sports as a kid or a youth and teenage years and that kind of stuff? And that's where you became like, I feel like when there's people that love to write about sports, at some point you've done both and they sort of merge. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have other friends that are writers and that cover sports, and that seems to be the path. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, I wasn't a great athlete in high school, but I played soccer. I did wrestling. I grew up in Pennsylvania, which is a really hard state to wrestle in. The kids up in the mountains are basically start wrestling when they're 3. At least back then in the 80s. So I think that I always had an interest in sort of the cultural side of sports. And so what I mean by that is I always loved picking up newspapers, and still do, like non-sports publications that do either sections or features on sports. Like every once in a while, the Atlantic Monthly or the Nation, like what Dave Zirin does, like they'll do just these deep cut pieces on not necessarily the political side of sports, but like kind of what Anthony Bourdain has done for culinary stuff and for cooking and cuisine. He doesn't take this, elite chef's point of view. He actually goes to the nitty gritty of, Koreatown in LA or the Lower East Side, and, hangs out with the taco truck owner or, somebody who, is the person you least expect would be on a show making, the most outrageous, perfect food you could ever have. I think that there's equivalents of that in sports, not as many as there used to be. I used to love watching Dick Schaap because, for one, he has this great personality. He's down to earth. He's not trying to stick his mic in the face of athletes the way that so many other, famous sportscasters do. Mm-hmm. But him and like Frank DeFord, and I used to love to listen to just kind of their cultural approach to sports and what makes people tick. And I guess that more than being involved in sports made it all go. And I was also really fascinated with, like, I'm not a Duke basketball fan. I'm actually a lifelong Villanova basketball fan. But I remember in the 80s when they would just like pick up the latest thing in the news that was bad or questionable about the visiting team, whether it was like a player that, did something he got arrested for, or, they imagine they would have had a field day with when Rick Pitino was kind of going through his troubles a couple years ago. Like, they had these specialized chants, and sometimes they chant in other languages. And I think there's one episode where there was and this isn't funny so much as there was, I think, a player that was from some other college that was accused of sexual assault. They weren't really sure what it was. And this was a game, I want to say in '89. And I think the Duke fans were throwing condoms on the court at one point. So, which is, that's brilliant and scummy and dirty at the same time. But
yeah, right.
Like these people actually were taking the time to make a statement through being a fan. And, I think super fans are more than just the person with the crazy wig and the sign. Like sometimes, and I think there's a whole basis of sports journalism that's evolved subtly around this, is that they really change the face of the game, and I think that's cool. And so I've been fascinated with those things and just kind of hoping I could tell a pure portion of that story, however I do it, and have lucked out with the relationships I built where I actually get to ask kind of every day, I think, relatable questions to professional athletes to kind of get an understanding of what they are like as people, not just, superstars.
Yeah. I think when you mentioned kind of the non-sports entities doing sports, I know some people they'll never give it a chance or whatever it may be. Like even I think sometimes it's always funny. So Phil Mickelson just won the PGA Championship, and I get an alert from the New York Times, and I'm like, New York Times, I'm aware of what's just occurred, right? But your point around like it's almost like an outsider comes in and sees your own culture. Like I'm in the golf culture kind of thing. Right. And I live it and see it. I'm on Twitter every day, and we're having conversations about architecture and the ball flying too far and all these things. And then someone comes in and looks at us and writes a story, and then I'll read it and be like, oh, that's how, like it's a totally different perspective on kind of the world that I participate in. And it's fascinating. It's super cool.
Yeah, one of the things that Greg Norman, I got to interview him 3 times now. Actually, the last time, strangely enough, was on January 6th. I'm like, finish up my interview with him, go down, turn the TV on, and see what the chaos happening in Washington.
Yeah.
Neither of us knew what was going on at the time, but he talked a lot on that third interview about learning. We got into who did you follow growing up? And of course, I knew that he was going to talk about Jack Nicklaus, but I wanted to know more, like, besides the fact that he was winning everything when you were a kid, like what else? And he talked about picking up his Jack Nicklaus's book. I think it was like 55 Ways to Play Golf or something like that. And, learning all the nuts and bolts about how the Golden Bear, holds the club and how he, I don't know, sort of how he conjugates his swing against the wind sometimes. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but I think the best players, like, they think about those things. And now we see Bryson DeChambeau. I'm not sure if he's still lifting to put on weight, but we kind of scoffed at it last February, January, whenever it was, when he wasn't as popular of a player and he was kind of seemed like a top 10 wannabe. And we thought he was just hitting the weight room because he had a girl to impress, or he was trying to, outbulk Brooks Koepka or something. And wow, the PGA champ. Was the PGA? Or was it the U.S. Open?
The
last
U.S.
year?
Open at Bethpage,
He's the only golfer who was under par of like everybody in the field the whole week.
Right.
Like he was impervious to those winds, and we knew that
and the rough and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
they're going to be bad enough, and then the winds just belted everybody, but not him. So there's something to be said about his drive, and I don't know that everybody's going to hit the weight room and try to achieve the same thing. Like what that was the narrative about 4 months ago. But like these athletes, they think about these things. They another thing, I got to interview Eric Barnes, who he's a Korn Ferry touring player. Excuse me. And when Korn Ferry was called up because of COVID, he was just working at a Publix. So he got a wife and a kid and knew it was temporary. But he's like, I stock shelves and would talk to the other coworkers about golf. And of course, I was like thinking about golf all day as I'm stocking shelves. And so of course my headline was going to be like Eric Barnes from Publix to the PGA Tour, because he got his PGA Tour card, I think, right in the middle of that. So, I've been rambling here a little bit, but I mean, I'm fascinated
with
little quirky things that, it's equivalent to, and you being a rock and roll guy, like you probably, I don't know what Pearl Jam's rider is before the shows, but, if Eddie Vedder has to have, 18 I don't know, crispy wafers before, so we get a sugar buzz to sit, like rock and roll stars do that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I think it's just to be like pretentious and annoying and to show that they wield power. But, certain people have they've got a regimen they follow. And I ask a little bit about that with the athletes that I get to interview, because I'm just kind of fascinated with I don't want to out them on anything stupid and quirky, but I was like, tell me about what you do to get ready and how what's going on in your mind. I think we all kind of want to know some of those things.
Yeah. And then one more golf story that I would like you to share, because I don't know it, but I've seen you reference it, and I think you've referenced it before, but you got putting lessons.
Yeah.
From a legend in the golf world.
Yeah. I was down at API last year. I got an invitation, and I thought that, I hadn't been to Orlando in years, and I've got actually an older roommate that I reconnected with from the 90s, and saw him once, and I knew he lived in Orlando. So, and I also knew he was a Phil Mickelson guy. I think he's one of those Phil guys who hates Tiger, actually.
Really?
So, I wanted to see him, but other than that, I was thinking I'm just going to kind of walk around the grounds and take pictures and kind of write generally about this Arnold Palmer Invitational and some of the, MasterCard at a sponsorship, and they sort of, they kind of bring out their brand ambassadors, and that was sort of one of the things that was happening that I thought I would end up writing about. I knew that I was going to interview the chief marketing officer of MasterCard, and when I finally got to him, he had just got off of the course doing a pro-am with Phil Mickelson, and he was giddy as a school kid. He was like, "Oh my God, that was so exciting." He's a great guy. He was lit up, and that was cool.
Yeah,
but when I flew in, I kind of looked at my itinerary, and my handler said, we're going to be doing some stuff. I'll get you the final itinerary by the time you get check into your hotel. And I check in, and I'm thinking that I'm going to, talk to the chief marketing officer of MasterCard and some so-so golfers, number 350 in the world at the time. And they changed the itinerary for the day on me, or the schedule, I guess you could say. It was me and a bunch of social media influencers, which I'll talk to you about that if you care to know them.
Yes, I have to know about that.
I guess because I write for Forbes, I'm not anybody special at Forbes, but they wanted to sort of take me seriously and give me. So anyway, they redo the schedule, and it's okay, so first thing, you got to be in the lobby at whatever god awful time, 7:45. We'll drive you over. You're going to meet and talk to Justin Rose first. I was like, wow, that's cool. And then the second thing is so stay there, stay in the same room after that happens, because you have a putting lesson with Annika Sorenstam. And I was like,
come on,
seriously, bro. And I was like, I think I emailed the guy back, is she going to be in there in person? Or I was like, yeah, of course. Yeah. If you don't have a putter, we'll give you one. So, I got to interview Justin Rose and kept a conversation with him. Totally forgot to take a picture with him as we, a brag photo, because, he's from England. He's a huge soccer fan. I'm a huge EPL fan in England. And we were talking about that. And we have our phones out, showing each other photos of this is my pub celebration when Harry Kane scored against Colombia in the World Cup, and, just sports geek stuff.
Yeah.
Then I kind of brushed myself off and got ready for my putting thing with Annika Sorenstam. And, she's very Scandinavian in that when you first meet her, it's she comes off as serious and analytical, but then you talk to her for 5-10 minutes, you realize she's got a pretty good sense of humor, and she, is actually kind of funny in a sort of subdued way.
Mm-hmm.
And just I shut up and listened. I was like, show me how to putt. And, it was on this little, green that was just outside the clubhouse. And it was, she had me putt uphill and downhill and, from the edge of the green. And it was about 20, 25 minutes. And it was super cool. I thought of the pregame activities, I got the best one. I mean,
right.
It's pretty awesome to golf with one of the best golfers of all time. So,
something else I think I appreciate about you too is that you've been doing this for a long time. You've been doing it for a while now, but you still have this sense of appreciation about where you are. You've posted pictures of you and Dave Ross together, you do appreciate it even still. It hasn't become a lot of times people chase their dream, and when they catch it, it becomes a job.
or they get a big head. Like I think of myself as I'm a sports fan. First and foremost, like I don't get fazed by famous people, and maybe it's just because I've been doing this a while. And I think I always keep in my head that they're humans too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, occasionally you get somebody. I haven't had any professional athletes who are jerks. Like, I mean, occasionally I get the ones who I say, tell me about, like, when you scored that touchdown, or when you're, it's the kind of thing, like, if you ask them how they're so good and what do you do to prepare, and they're like, I don't know, I don't really think about it, I just do it.
Right.
They say 3-4 times in an interview, you're like, thanks, dude, thanks a lot, that gives me a lot to write with. I've had a couple of those, maybe 2 or 3. But generally, like, I think some of them it's they're media trained. And then if you get someone who's been out of the game for a little while, like I got to interview Scottie Pippen last summer. And I wasn't allowed to ask him about The Last Dance. And I thought he was fine for the most part. But I mean, maybe he felt like he got not really portrayed fairly. Anyway, I didn't have to ask him about that. But I knew that, he's part of the dream team, the 92 dream team. So I thought, well, maybe he has something interesting to say about the Olympics, because nobody really asked him about that, because it's always Bulls, Michael Jordan, 6 championships. And he talked about how much pride he had in being part of that. And, also he feels like the rest of the world at that time in 92, and probably still now, was really interested in the NBA. And they were also just genuinely, the players, interested in seeing how much the rest of the world cared about basketball, and if they did to the same degree. It wasn't just people wanting pictures with Jordan. It was, people wanting to take a picture with, Chris Mullins, or to shoot around with, B.J. Armstrong or whoever. I don't remember who was all on the team, but
yeah, John Stockton, probably. Yeah.
John Stockton, that he took a lot of pride in that. And I was interested in probably whatever he would have to say about it. And you don't need to get controversial. You don't need to be like, so what did you really think about Isaiah? Or,
right.
Is it really like to be number 2 to Michael Jordan?
Right.
Adulation, sticking your mic in the face of the athlete the way that, like, Jim Gray might do. I don't need to be Jim Gray. There's already one Jim Gray. So
yeah.
I think just be relatable. And, when you get those opportunities, I have no reason to have a big head or to think that, they would know who the hell I am, because they don't. So then you get someone like David Feherty who treats you like you're just like he's just like you, and that's pretty awesome, because then you keep a conversation, and the interview goes really well, and you get nuggets and unpolished gems that are cool to hear as a sports fan, but also make for good writing in a sports article, I think.
I wanted to bring up, thank you for bringing up Feherty, because I did want to add, like, is Feherty like a real person? Like, is he who he is all the time? Because it seems like it would be exhausting to be David Feherty.
Yeah, he totally is. I mean, you might perceive him sometimes as putting on an act. He's just really easygoing. I think he's probably this is a Generation X type reference. Like, I think, like, I have this inner Beavis and Butthead cackling, tape playing in my head, where I'm always like, this mic is big. Like, he's kind of funny about stuff like that himself. I don't know what his take is, but he's always kind of joking his head about things, and he doesn't take himself that seriously. I think those two things melded together is why he's such a I think he's the best interviewer in sports of all time. That's why he's such a damn good interviewer. And he can get, I never really thought about, like, bottling myself after him, but I mean, he does in the long form, an artistic sense, like everything that, you and I, as podcasters and writers would ever hope to do with, like, the biggest people in the sport. And also, like, a couple of U.S. presidents and, Bill Russell and other, Hall of Famers from other sports. Like, he's about as authentic as they come. I mean, I'm not sure what it's like to hang out with him for a full day, but I think he's really real. And, like, so I was talking to some guys who run another golf podcast called Sneaky Par about a month ago, and they asked about him. And I was like, hey, dudes, I'm not bragging, but, like, I have his cell phone number because that's how David Feherty is. It's like, so I want to do a follow-up interview. Do I need to, like, email your agent or someone at NBC? He's like, no, just send me a text. And, he's like that. I remember, I think the first time we did that, I want to say it was right about when his show the announcement came out that it wasn't going to be renewed. And, I just kind of sent him something. It's like, hey, sorry about your show. You've been great all this time. I hope to see you as much as possible. And he was, we just kind of back and forth a little bit. and he doesn't act like, who's this? He's like, thanks, Andy, you know. So if you ever get a chance to meet him, you know, definitely go for it. He's super chill and
that's
fun as hell. And
so you're just like text pals with David Feherty, like no big deal. Just kind of.
sometimes we were joking about he didn't get into politics, but I remember it was something last fall where like he was joking about you know, as he would, like I like that all you need to be in politics is like be an old person and, you know, retire from another job first, and you can go, you know, be a politician and, you know, run the country. You know, it's like easier gig than we all have combined, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't going to like be like, so what do you think about so-and-so? But I mean, the fact that he was joking about it, like it was just, you know, my buddy from 20 years ago that I've known, you know, he's like one of those just down to earth people, I think. And that's, at least that's my read on him. So,
yeah, I'm always impressed with, we talk about like, you know, getting an athlete to kind of bring down their self-imposed barriers or their walls or something. And whatever that dude does works.
mm-hmm.
I feel like, I don't know if it's just his, you know, maybe his rep or his reputation or whatever it is, but you feel like whoever he is talking to has forgotten there are microphones and cameras. Yeah. And they're just hanging out with Feherty.
Yeah. I think he's had some real life, you know, troubles just like all the rest of us. And I think he keeps that in stride. And when I got to interview him last summer, I had emailed someone I knew who was working, a PR person who was working the NBC account, like on the soccer side, and said, let me know if you know anybody at the Golf Channel, because I'd like to see if I can interview David Feherty. That was kind of like my goal for that summer. And, you know, I got sent around to a couple of different people. Then they came back. It's like, yeah, well, actually he's broadcasting the U.S. Open for the first time. He's pretty psyched about that. You know, obviously NBC wanted to talk about having it on the Golf Channel. So
sure.
They're kind of like, well, please ask about that. And, you know, of course you want to talk about the U.S. Open, but he started out with him talking about the one time he played it, that he didn't make the cut, and he was doing pretty well, except he double bogeyed, I think, on the last two holes and missed the cut by a shot. And like, he never played another major again, but he kind of sounds like, yeah, I don't really have fond memories of playing at the U.S. Open, but I love to watch it just like you do. So that was kind of cool to hear him say that, you know, it treated him poorly, but he wanted to do right by the U.S. Open as a broadcaster too, and just tell the stories who's on the course.
Yeah, when you're like pitching a story about that, like I'm always fascinated to hear how a story will kind of come to life. So I'm sure Forbes has some input on things, but is it mostly you just kind of chasing ideas and trying to kind of, you know, integrate, like you said, kind of the business side or whatever it may be with a sport that you have an interest in or a story that you have an interest in?
Yeah. Well, the Forbes, I get to do pretty much what I want. And so, sorry, I hear an airplane passing over me here. I got the window open. With Forbes, it's basically I do 5 articles a month, and as long as I stick to sports, you know, I can do whatever I want. When I got an email, for example, about Julian Edelman before he was retiring, I got an email about him doing an NFT, which I didn't really know a lot about NFTs, but you know, Gronk did his thing where you can buy through an auction NFTs of his highlight reel moments. And Edelman's really into comic books and like Pokemon and stuff. Believe it or not, he doesn't look like it, but so he was doing kind of a theme of NFTs with that, and some of the proceeds were going to like I think Stop the Hate is the name of the organization. Yeah. But, you know, because it's technically crypto, I did email the editor. It's like, look, I know this is crypto. I don't really care about the crypto piece, but I want to interview Julian Edelman. Are you cool with that? And I just had to, you know, cross-check that. And that's pretty much all I need to do at Forbes. I mean, they'll tell if there's a mass shooting today, they send us all a message saying, don't write about this till you have approval. Right. You know, I read about sports anyway. Right. So it's different than it was at Rolling Stone, where I was at Rolling Stone for almost 2 years, 2016 to 2018. And actually the sports editor at the time was also a Cubs fan from Chicago. So he hit it off pretty well. But, you know, we still had to kind of sort out what stories we were going to do about the 16 World Series and everything after that. But, you know, I had to pitch, and, you know, I knew that editor well enough that we could kind of talk about ideas, or I could say, he'd always say, well, what's your angle? And I'd say, well, what does the angle need to be to cover the story? Because, I mean, there's obviously you take any sports story, like you take, Brooks Koepka getting flustered the other day when like Bryson supposedly said something to him, and you cover that from 10 different ways. So how do you want, depending on the publication, if you're Barstool, you want to kind of roll it in mud and make it as sensational as possible. Or if you're writing for the Intellectual Sports Quarterly, it's going to be, something very different. So,
right.
So yeah, I don't have to pitch stories anymore. Sometimes I got to cross check them with editors, but so I focus primarily on Q&As with, major athletes, kind of what comes in my inbox and what I'm interested in. I used to get a lot of, like, back when I started with Rolling Stone, I get a lot of stuff from like, hey, do you want to interview the Red Bull? It was actually one of them, like the Daredevil flying champion, who was like a 58-year-old guy, a pilot who just looks like Daredevil with the, like those old style planes with like the wings up and the wings below you and a propeller. Like they have a competition for that. And I was like, yeah, sounds interesting, but no, thank you, because I don't think Rolling Stone would cover that. But over those, a lot of those, like, no thank yous, I started building some relationships in the sports and sports marketing world. And then when I jumped over to Forbes, and it was pretty much anything I wanted to write about sports as game, then it became a situation where I could really field a variety of stories, provided that it was provided that it's got an athlete that I can quote. The first thing I ever wrote for Forbes in May of 2019 was an article literally titled, it was just my rant opinion piece, "Sports is better without LeVar Ball in 2018" was the name of the article.
Can you send me that? I want to read that. Let's link that. I need to read. Why? Why?
Well, I didn't want to be like, I didn't want to like call him say he's the worst person who ever existed or anything. But I think I was just kind of fed up
with the shtick.
Yeah, with the shtick, and with when you've got Ramona Shelburne covering him, like he's the story at the Lakers, like
right.
Is she the Lakers? She's a national writer, but I mean, she's also got kind of a basketball beat writer approach. But I felt like she was becoming the LeVar Ball beat writer, and then there's another guy from ESPN who followed him to Lithuania to cover his sons joining the league, but all the videos was about LeVar Ball shooting his mouth off and what he thought, and I was like kind of annoyed. We sports fans get passionate about those little nitpicky things that irk us. And I just thought, from a journalistic standpoint, like, do we need to have a senior correspondent covering LeVar Ball? So, I mean, that was just a rant that I had at that day. Awesome. I got some decent reads, but that's not the direction I wanted to go primarily. I think it was just like, I'll start this thing with a bang, and this is kind of on my mind. And then after that, it was talking with Johnny Bench about like, grilling out, and Cal Ripken about, him selling his estate. He was actually moving out of his big house and, simplifying his life with that. And, but with both of them, I asked Johnny Bench, like, so what's so special about being a catcher from a catcher's point of view? And I want to know, why Cal Ripken thought that the shortstop was the most important position in baseball, because they got some pretty strong opinions about that, and those made for pretty cool articles. That I'd let them be opinionated instead of me. Like the first LeVar Ball articles.
Right. Man, there's all just the name. Like I'm a huge Cal Ripken guy. Until I wanted to be Cal. So my first baseball stance that I ever copied was Ryan Sandberg's. The second one was Cal Ripken's. Even though he's 6'4" and I am not 6'4", but it was like whatever. And I played shortstop for a little while until I stopped growing, and then they moved me to the right side of the infield. But yeah, I just keep thinking like, so you were for the other people here that would say I'm too old to change, to do something new, or I'm too old to take this chance. I mean, you were pretty. I'm not gonna say you're old, but you were in a job, you were in a career for a long time before you decided that I'm gonna do something else. And I also want to know, were you married when you made this decision?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So my wife is very supportive, and she probably wants me to shut up and stop talking about sports. Go write your blog so I don't have to hear about it.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, at the time, my kid's 15 right now, and he's almost 15. He's more into video games than anything else. But like, I think trash talk's in the blood because he didn't even grow up in Philadelphia, and he, like I did, and he hates the Cowboys and he hates the White Sox and hates the Packers, and he's not the kid who's he's not going to watch the football game for 3 hours on a Sunday. So like just kind of like. My wife would go to bed at 9:30 anyway. My kid be in bed, so it's like, yeah, go cover football on Friday night. That's cool. And but like we do little fun things like so. It's not. I'm a diehard sports fan in a different way. So like we went to New York, I think about 3 years ago, and my birthday is April 5th. So we went to a Yankees game, and I think it was the second. It wasn't the home opener. It was the second game of the season. But we got to see the Orioles were in town. Got to see Manny Machado play shortstop for the first time because they made room for him.
Yeah.
And then also Aaron Judge hit his first home run of the season that game. And then just like at Wrigley, by the seventh inning, we're frozen to the bone.
Right.
Right. Technically the weather report says it's 61 degrees. We're freezing.
Yeah.
And, you do what you do in New York. You start walking and keep walking, and then you're like, oh, Italian restaurant, let's get something to eat. So, but I've taken the family to one of the first things when I was doing the weird sports thing for Page 2. I checked out I think it was the collegiate fencing competitions were at like the national championship. I think was at Northwestern one weekend, and I'd never seen fencing before. So
yeah,
it's like. Wife is like, so what should we do for family dinner tonight? I'm like, well, if you want to come up to Evanston, because I used to work at Evanston at the time, I'm like, all right, so let's go get dinner. And there's this like, and it's free. We can go see fencing. It was the coolest thing ever. Like these dudes with the wire mesh masks, and men and women. So the women were more light-footed and more graceful than the men were for sure. They're all like chopping each other and stuff.
Right.
We got to see, I think it was, by the time we got there, it's probably like the quarterfinals because it started Thursday. I think this was a Friday evening that we went. So like I try to include the family in this and, not make it all about me. I'm not going to drag somebody to a Bears game or when Man City is in town. But I know that, if I want to see Man City and they're in town, somebody's going to want to go with me, or I'm going to find someone with a ticket. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's just back to the job thing. It was like I was, I think to put it a different way, I was blogging starting in 2009 as a late 30-something to stay sane in a way.
Yeah.
Because even if you like your job, when you're selling things all day and putting up with underwriters and, nitpicky stuff like your files being perfect or you didn't, dot this I, you're either going to, jump out a window or you need to do something to kind of offset that. And you can only go to the gym so many times in a week. So, So the blogging was kind of like a good release, and I wanted to fine tune it. I got like even if 8 of my friends from back home read it, which was what it was at the time, I wanted it to be good and not just sloppy journalism. I thought, well, I don't know where it's going to go, but if it goes somewhere, I want to be ready, and I think I'm a good enough writer that maybe someday I'll get something published. And I kept at it, and it's just like. If you were into Taekwondo and, you test for your black belt, you're probably going to go do a competition and try to win somewhere outside Chicago. If you're from Chicago, you might go to California or like, we all know people who take up running and marathons and they, in normal times when it's not COVID, people go, to nice places to run. Like I remember the thing for a while was a bunch of my Chicago running friends went to run some marathon in Ireland. I think just because they wanted to drink beer in Ireland and be in Ireland to run a marathon. So I ran it, Like that's kind of the same. That's the kind of same thing I do with my writing. Like I kind of want it to be a little bit of a personal tourism as a sports fan.
Yeah,
I think having that approach, letting your inner fan be a fan, is probably one thing that drives the passion and makes it easier, especially when you get a no from an editor or whatever. So when you're a story.
I mean, how do you? It's almost to me like it would be overwhelming to have so much freedom in what you can cover. If you go from fencing to, what'd you call the handball game? It wasn't handball.
Fistball. Yeah.
Fistball.
I don't do any of those anymore.
Right.
But even like what, but like
still you're bouncing from sport to sport to sport. I mean,
So the downside is I don't have like, if you are a dedicated baseball blogger with a podcast, like you have all the baseball people follow you. I span a lot of sports, and I guess my common thread is I do Q&As and interviews with, all kinds of top level sports stars. Right. And that's just what I do. And I think I do it well. I'm not going to get hardcore baseball people following me because I wrote, 2 baseball articles in the last 2 months,
Right.
Or even though I've done more golf, it's like, unless you pop an interesting story that's like revolutionary. But so, there's good and bad with everything you do. I don't get hung up on like how many social followers I have, or, it's definitely not about the paycheck, because, I have other project work that I do. And if it was about, making a certain amount of money, then I'd probably be dead in the water from when I started, but it's all been good.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that would, talk about, worrying about some things that at the end of the day, like social follower counts or, even like click stuff, like, people are going to read stuff that interests them, and there's so much of it. And if, the hope would be, like, for me anyways, you wrote about something that caught my attention and it was really good. And so I decided I want to read more of what you do. Like, it goes from, I was pulled in by the guest of your article, so to speak. But then, I enjoyed your writing to the point where, like, now it doesn't matter. You could interview anybody. You can interview the head of the, Fistball team. And I'm like, I want to know what questions Andy asked, and I want to hear the answers. Right.
Thanks. So, well, I'm wondering though, that if you focus primarily on golf, so I ask golf fans this, like, who's your favorite golfer, and who do you root for? And do you root against Patrick Reed? I want to know those 2 things.
I don't root against anyone. I have a general rule in sports. I watch sports to enjoy sports. So I'm not a big booer. I don't boo. And I don't root against anyone. Now, will I like if someone else would win besides Patrick Reed? Yes.
Yeah.
Because I don't like him, but I won't. I mean, if he's in, I'll watch if he's playing, but I would never root against somebody. Like, whatever. That dude worked hard for the most part. Yeah. But yeah, so I don't like Patrick Reed, but the favorite golfer thing is interesting because it kind of, the way that tournaments are set up, it sort of rotates through. So like, I like Brett Snedeker. I like Rory. Obviously Tiger is, a draw. Jordan Spieth, to me, as someone who just loves when golf is important to other people besides the golf nerds like myself. Yeah. Jordan Spieth is kind of our new Needle in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. He's kind of like young Phil almost. Yeah. So yeah, those are kind of my guys, I guess.
What do you think about, like, he's not been, until this weekend, he's not been playing really well, but I think Ricky Fowler, I was going to say, it's kind of like, I think he was going to be the Happy Gilmore, for the non-golf fans, and maybe bring.
Right.
Right. I've got some friends who are not golf followers who are like, they said they like him. They don't know, they probably didn't watch the PGA Championship this weekend, but yeah, I guess if he was playing better and more consistent, that he would, he'd be a stronger draw, but who knows, maybe he's bouncing back now.
I would like to think I do. I know Ricky gets kind of a hard time because he's like in every single commercial on the Golf Channel or during golf broadcasts or whatever. But hey, like, go get your bucks, man. Like, go do what you want to do. But you're right. If he was in the last group on a Sunday, mm-hmm. I feel like lots of people would be paying attention because he had to get the invite to the PGA Championship, right? Mm-hmm. I don't even think he qualified for the Masters to play there. So he hasn't been very good. So I think just the story in and of itself of his sort of comeback almost would draw. And then, like, everybody likes Ricky Fowler. How can you not like Ricky Fowler?
Yeah. Everybody loves comeback stories too. So, I'm just wondering I hear a lot of conversations around baseball now, like, what does baseball have to do to attract new fans? And I hear there's different conversations in golf, and that, so for today I'm hearing some golf people like, we really need this Brooks Bryson thing to rile up and, be like a near throwdown, be so great for golf. And there's other people who are like, no, that would distract from the game. And,
Right.
But I mean, to have like a Tiger versus Phil type rivalry between two young players, obviously you can't fix that.
Right.
Up and it's just going to proceed naturally. But there are a lot of great young golfers. I think, seeing Matsuyama win the Masters, kind of just he was unbeatable that week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, him and Zalatoris.
Yeah.
Like I'm a bit of a Justin Rose fan, and he was leading the first 2 days. And by Sunday, I was like, he can play as good as he wants. There's something else going on here that, that's happening cosmically that,
right.
That's just, we gotta accept it for what it is. And it was a great finish of the Masters to see, a new person win it. Like you're saying, somebody else that's not won it before and is a new face perhaps.
Yeah, I'm also a big Justin Rose fan and a Graham McDowell fan. Those are my two. And Ian Poulter. I know Ian Poulter is like, he's kind of a killer from a Ryder Cup perspective, but he's just it's kind of like Rory to me, is that he's just an open, honest human being that doesn't seem, at least on the surface, you're always worried about what people are actually like, when cameras are off or whatever, but they just seem like they're normal people that happen to be, one of the great 1% at something.
Yeah, but everybody's human, though. I mean, I think for the most part, everybody is, if you get them out of their, off of the podium, they're at least with people. I mean, some people who are introverted are difficult to interview, and no matter what sport that is. But a lot of them, I think, if an athlete's had some success, they know that they're going to have to talk to the press. And then when they encounter somebody who's not, microphone in face, trying to trip them up or make them say something that they don't intend to say, that, and you talk to them like a real person, that they respond well to that because they know who they are. So,
yeah. You've got a book? You're writing a book?
Working on a book. Yeah. So working title, Smashing Adversity. It really started with the fact that I ask more questions and get more content than I use in the interviews. And I found myself asking questions, like one I posed actually to Greg Norman was, so what's it like when you're like, what do you do? And what's it like when you're having a really bad day on the course? I think it came on the back end of who did you hate to play against? He was talking about Seve, he was very good friends with, and that Seve could hit it in the parking lot, or it could be in the rain gutter of someone's house, and then he'd still, shoot a birdie. And Greg would still be on the fairway trying to get his, ball to do what it was supposed to do. So yeah, I've been writing a book called Smashing Adversity. It's literally taken that kind of question. What was your worst day like? Or what are some things that you struggle with that us fans don't see, posed to all different types of athletes? So I've been fortunate really to interview a lot of athletes. In golf, it's been Greg Norman and Annika Sorenstam, and I'm trying to work out a follow-up interview with her.
Cool.
Talked to Justin Rose a couple of times, but then it's also like I've talked to Megan Rapinoe a couple of times, and I think she's great. And a lot of some people regard her, I think wrongly, as polarizing because she's outspoken. The interesting thing about her is she never set out to be an icon or a superstar, and definitely didn't think she was going to win the Golden Boot and be probably the most recognizable soccer player on the planet right now, besides David Beckham, who hasn't played for a number of years.
Right.
With her, the question would be, talking about the struggle of kind of balancing, who you are as an outspoken person against just trying to be, good enough to play on a World Cup team and affect the team's outcome positively. Yeah. I've also talked to I talked to Melissa Stockwell, who is a triathlete. She lost her left leg, part of her left leg in Iraq when she was a lieutenant. And after she came home, she started doing some things to kind of help out other veterans. And she was always an athlete in college and high school, and was just kind of a person who loved sports, and decided, I want to go do something. And now she's going to be competing for the second time in the Olympics.
Wow.
In Tokyo. Obviously that's different than you or me having a bad day on the course, or
right,
shanking the ball. That's a bigger deal than, I think of another rock reference. I'm sure you've seen many episodes of VH1 Behind the Music. Yes. And we always do the portion where whether it's Pearl Jam or Ozzy, or Neil Young, it's the drugs and alcohol or someone dies. I think the only band that ever had the difficult moment that wasn't very difficult was the Bon Jovi episode where like John lost his voice for 2 days. I was like, oh, poor baby.
I remember that. That's amazing. Yeah.
He didn't have his guitarist die in a plane crash on tour like Ozzy did.
Right.
But like, obviously with a lot of these athletes, like I don't want to get in their business and ask like nosy things that are really personal. If they want to talk about them, like, Feherty's talked a little about his alcoholism and,
Sure.
not being as good of a golfer as he thought he would be when he was in competition, outside Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they give you those gifts and you softly ask, tell me about that a little bit more. But, with 20 some odd different athletes I've interviewed, there's an interesting addition. Each one, it's a unique and different story in which they've battled adversity. So I just came up with Smashing Adversity in my head. And I think, I checked on Barnes & Noble. There's not a book by that title. So I just pigeonhole the title and
nice.
Working on the sort of the promotion deal part of it, as
oh,
we
wow.
speak.
So is it done? Would you call it like
No.
Oh, I was going to, okay. I was going to say like, well, my question was when you have a book like that in the works, like, how do you know when it's done? Like, because there's a million stories like that, right?
Yeah. Well, basically what you do is you sort of pick your perspective, chapters, table contents. You do a book proposal and you connect with people in the industry. And I've been told I wrote a novel actually, which is not published yet, and who knows if it will be. But it's about you or me, people like us in our generation love music, and so it's about this woman who time travels back to the 1990s to kind of fix her life a little bit. And then the part of the dilemma is that she ends up having like way more fun back in the 90s than she thought she would. So I got a lot of like polite no's, but then some literary agents said, well, I know you write about sports. So if you have a big sports idea, sports book, I think was the term that I've heard twice. Like, let me know when that happens. Check you later. And that was, 6-8 months ago. And I thought, well, I got to do something with some of these, these interviews I've done.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of stuff that like the interview goes on long enough that there's stuff that I didn't put in Forbes that, can make for another article. And that's really the basic basis for the book. So, it's still in the works, but it's, it's about ready to roll out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I feel like the publisher's missing out on the 90s book, man, because right now the 90s have never been cooler.
You think? I still feel like I'm waiting for it to be even more. Like, I think people are like, yeah, the 90s were cool. But it's not like, so when the Beastie Boys, they released their second album, Pulse Boutique, people say they released, it was ahead of its time because it was about 2 or 3 years before the 70s thing was really cool. Like, I don't know if you remember, you're in Chicago, right? So
yeah.
Do you remember there's a bar, 70s themed dance club called Polyesters downtown? Sure. Like any night of the week, you want to go dress up in a bell bottoms and dance. And,
right.
Drink martinis and wear big wigs. Like that was really like the 70s were really cool in the 90s. I don't think we're quite there with the 90s being that cool yet, but we'll keep hoping and maybe.
I don't know, man. I keep seeing girls in like overalls again, like back in the 90s, and like the high-waisted pants in the 90s, and there just seems a lot of
singles look, or like with
like Reality Bites.
Yeah, like the Reality Bites look.
Right. I see a lot of dudes starting to try to look like Ethan Hawke from Reality Bites. So I don't know, maybe, just another year and they'll be ready to go. But yeah. I mean, I don't know.
But I mean, in the meantime, I've got plenty of sports stories to call through that I figure that I've had enough cool interviews with important athletes, and I think I've gotten good stuff from them. So it's about time to get off my butt and write a book. And that's what I've been working on. So
super cool. What else do you have going on for the year? How do you plan this stuff out? I mean, I'm sure there's some reactionary things, but at the same time, maybe you try to map out at least a quarter or something, or a couple months.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of at a high level. Like I've interviewed some NFL athletes, and, I don't really specialize in that. So you're not going to see me do like my team ranking or predictions for the season. It's more like I know that when training camp starts, some of the people I know in sports marketing are going to contact me and say, do you want to talk to, Brian Westbrook, or one time it was Urlacher, which was great. I got to interview him.
That's fun. Yeah.
Right after he got, when he was getting inducted to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So it happens more on a rolling basis, but I know covering NASCAR, I know that, I know when Speed Weeks is, and I'm usually going to do something for that. So the last 2 years I've gotten young drivers, and I've gotten a couple of, some of the female drivers, which most people who are writing about NASCAR or even bloggers, like they're not concentrating on that. So last year, within a month, like that month of Speed Weeks, before Speed Weeks happened, I interviewed Haley Deegan, who's like 19 years old now. She was 18 when she was kind of at a lower level of NASCAR. Now she's in I think she's in the Xfinity and the Truck Series, which are like the second and third level. Natalie Decker, who is another driver, and she's dynamic to talk to, and Angela Ruck, who is she's probably pushing 40, and she's been in the Truck Series for a couple of years, and she has her own reality TV show and her own following. So that was one that her fans were interested in. So I felt like I was doing a different, kind of keeping with my theme, doing a different thing on major sports.
Yeah. And
not because I'm trying to be weird, different, and unique, but I mean, I think that there are different angles that you can always uncover. And, that's, I wasn't going to try to chase the top guys who, I think it was just more interesting to take a different, and it just probably helps make me a better writer to find out more about more unique stories from athletes that maybe haven't been focused on as much.
For sure. Yeah. And like to your point too, I think it's easy to, the super popular athletes or whatever, the best in their sport or the most well-known, like there's a million stories about those people, and the angles become harder and harder to find when there's this really great story just sitting there for you if you want to look and tell that story. And it's, I mean, that's why even I feel like on this show, for example, like I could get the sort of, I'm never going to get some of these people on the show now, but like you can get the retreads, right? Like you can get the golfer guy to come on a golf podcast. That's not hard. But they've been on, 100 podcasts. So really go listen to those ones if you want to hear that guy talk about whatever. So that's kind of, I totally get that. I totally understand that. Although I got to say this is a golf podcast, and it's around, golf origin stories. Now we've gone through your writing origin story, but I don't what is your history with the game of actual golf? Like, do you get to play it often? Do you like golf? Like,
well, it's like everything else in my adult life. Like even writing, I adopted late, and I'll probably be really good by the time I'm 80. So I didn't grow up playing golf and never really played golf until a couple of years ago, probably because my dad never played golf. It's funny because I talked to him about golf probably for the first time. So my dad's like 75, and had my first conversation about golf just off the cuff, maybe about 2-3 months ago. I don't know what we were talking about. I think it was around the time I was interviewing Patrick Cantley, and he doesn't know who he is, but
okay.
He's like, I used to play golf, until you were born. Like he said, I was actually played golf all the time. And I was like, I didn't even know. I didn't even know he owned clubs actually, ever. So he never mentioned that the whole time I was growing up. And then he also said something that was pretty interesting. He's like, so do you know, we're actually related to Sam Snead. And I was like, what?
Come on.
He's like, he said, I think his mother, my grandmother, who I loved, my grandmother was super cool to hang out with. She died in 2003, I think. One of my last memories of her was I was driving from Chicago to Pennsylvania, stopped at grandma's house, and we watched Caddyshack together, actually.
Come on.
And I knew that she was a cool grandma, but I never kind of saw her. Yeah. Like, oh, let's see. Oh, yeah, I love this movie. Like, really? I didn't know that she smoked either, and she was smoking a cigarette. And I never knew she smoked the whole time I was like, I didn't even. And
wow.
I think I asked one of my cousins, and they're like, "Yeah, she's smoked her whole life. You didn't know that?" Like, well, did you know she likes Caddyshack? She's seen it a couple times, and we watched it together. But anyway, so like that grandma, I think one of her second cousin was married to Sam Snead. He only had one wife, so I don't remember what her name is. But yeah,
wow.
I don't know if she went to the wedding or anything, but yeah. So I'm related by marriage to Sam Snead, the original first best golfer, of this generation. Yes. So. Right. So that's my origin, is that I was, I guess, connected to golf all these years and didn't really know.
Right.
No idea. It's kind of like finding out about the brother or sister you didn't know you had. Like, oh, you have a brother named Michael, and he's 50 years old. You guys will get along perfectly. Like, kind of a weird thing. So,
Yeah.
But with the golf trip, like the golf coverage, and I've gone and, when I got to go to API, rented clubs when I was down there, I just golfed a little bit.
Did you?
A couple of years ago, this is maybe about a year and a half ago, I was in the Bahamas around the time that the Hero World Cup was going on. The Hero World Challenge, sorry.
Right.
So Tiger tournament in the Bahamas. I missed the first thing, which was like him and Rahm and some of the other top golfers were basically having like a target practice where outside some hotel, they had to like land the ball in this, like literally a target in the grass.
Right.
And then, so I found out the next day for that little junction, I was basically paired up with 3 real golf writers. So one was a guy named, and they're all like, like 2 handicaps and stuff.
Yeah.
One was a guy who wrote for golf.com, a guy named Ryan Aselta, who's, I think he's worked for Sports Illustrated in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
A guy named Mark Harris, who's at Bro Bible, who's an editor. And he's like, Mark is one of those guys who he's played golf all his life, made a decision when he was like 14 or 15 as a right-handed person to learn how to play golf left-handed. And he's really good.
Oh, the worst.
So the third one, who was kind of my coach for the week, like, Andy, hit the ball here. Okay, pick up your ball. We're going to go down. Was a guy named Oliver Horowitz. So Oliver Horowitz, he wrote, I knew that he wrote a book. He didn't brag about it. He didn't even tell us that he wrote a best-selling book about being a caddy at St. Andrews. Mm-hmm. So Oliver Horowitz's dad is Israel Horovitz, the world famous playwright, and his brother is Ad Rock and the Beastie Boys. He wrote this best-selling book, and the book is basically about being a caddy and like you're lower than the cow dung on the adjacent cow patch next to the field, and you're getting treated by crap by all these locals. But then he got to golf with Michael Douglas and he got to caddy for Michael Douglas and Huey Lewis, who actually both reviewed his book. So if you get his book, it's called An American Caddy in St. Andrews. Like, you flip through the first 2 pages, it's like a couple of famous people have read and reviewed his book. Awesome. He had said nothing about this while we were there. He was like super chill. He's really like a gregarious, talkative kind of guy. He talked about going to, I think, Nepal or India. I think it was Nepal. He was covering a girl in Nepal who's a teenager who's pretty good at golf, and he does like short form documentary videos, and he was covering this up and coming golfer. Mm-hmm. And so her dream to come play in the US. And I think, at the time she was gunning for a scholarship at like a good golf college. And then like, at the end of this couple-day trip, he was off to Patagonia to golf in Patagonia.
My gosh.
In Argentina. Like, that's a golf lifestyle. I'm just writing about it a little bit, learning how to play and taking my 8-iron and mostly hitting it straight for the most part. And I'm with these 3 guys who are like either serious golf writers or golf adventurers.
Right.
Like the MacGyver of golf was one of them, pretty much, is how I would describe Oliver Horowitz. But all good guys. And like, I think when you're the new guy who doesn't really know how to play golf, like, not to make people wait and not to, screw it up too much, and, just try to have fun and don't ask too many stupid questions. But I mean, the playing, as kind of gears you, puts your head in the game more. So then, not that we know anything about the perfect swing, but when you're watching the PGA Championship or the Masters and you see somebody do something interesting, like I remember seeing Justin Thomas, he's right-handed, take his club and like hit it kind of backwards and left-handed through some trees. Like,
upside down. Wow,
that was really cool. Like, how do you do that? Like, can you take a lesson on that? I don't think so, but maybe you can. I mean, the thing is just learning and loving the game and just learning and listening, and sometimes shut your mouth and just, you'll absorb stuff. So. Yeah.
Cool, man. This is fun.
Well, thanks. I'm sorry. I know I talk a lot, but
you said
golf, and I'm like opening up here. So
as long as I've said before, like when I look at the kind of the audio, the less my line does stuff, the better the show.
Well, good.
That's kind of the rule. So yeah, I'm super cool with you. I mean, you're full of great stories.
Well, thanks.
Like,
They're not my stories; they're athlete stories, and hopefully that's what'll make the book, readable if not successful. But we'll see how that goes.
I can't wait for it. I think it's actually, I mean, I don't need to be the one to tell you it's a great idea, but it's about interesting people, right, that we kind of know, and it can be a bit of an inspiring thing. Like, you can read some stories about how people overcame some really tough stuff, and people can use that as their own sort of ammunition. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there's a big market for, I think about how many people have bought books from, the Anthony Robbins and the Deepak Chopras. And if there can be more of those books about sports, I'm not saying that mine's going to be on the shelf with any of theirs, but if there are sports people like us who can sort of, kind of move away from the archetypical, just, be mindful self-help thing and maybe sprinkle a little bit of sports in there, I think that'd probably be good for everyone's soul.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is, like you were talking about, there's too much gotcha stuff everywhere all the time. And something that just says, I want to tell these stories about these people is welcome in my world. It's just a nice break from all the other nonsense.
Yeah. And after COVID and staying indoors for a better part of the year, I think we need to be inspired and, be outdoors for the sports. So, like, the last thing anybody's going to want to do right now, if they even exist, is to go watch a baseball game in an indoor stadium.
Right. I never thought, it's kind of funny that you talk about that. Two things I didn't realize I took so much for granted so much was golf, because we lost it. We couldn't play golf for a while. And I really thought, like, I appreciated getting out and playing golf, but I didn't. I still took it for granted. And Wrigley Field, man.
Yeah.
I've missed Wrigley Field so much. It's such like such a tradition that, of course, I'm going to go to Wrigley Field a few times. Right. Man. Yeah. It's great now. 25% capacity is like, it's kind of the best way. You can't get to Wrigley. You can't be in Wrigley Field with less, with that few of people in it. It's kind of great.
Yeah. It's kind of like showing up to the game 2 hours early.
Right. But it stays that way the whole time.
I'm going to get my beers and relax, but then your beers are done by the time that, the pitchers are pulling up. And
right. Yeah. All right. I'll let you go. Thank you for staying. We've gone past the hour. I told you I only take an hour of your time, but here we are beyond that.
Yeah, it was awesome. Good talking to you.